Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We have well over 1,000 registrants today, so we are going to spend an extra minute or two making sure that everybody gets logged on. We should have plenty of seats. Dr. Sines is with us, and so please know that we'll get going here in a minute or two. Thanks for your patience. After doing 6 of these webinars, I'm looking at the chat list and I'm seeing names I've seen before. It's like we're old friends. Welcome back. Looks like we, again, are coast to coast in having our audience here today. And maybe, I don't know if our Canadian friends will join us today, but welcome. And we also have some friends from Australia who have joined us a few times. And if you're here, know that we're very happy you're back and welcome. We're going to get started here in just about a minute. We still have lots of people rolling in, and I would like to do the very best I can to make sure that everybody gets to hear Dr. Sines' comments today. So bear with us just a minute. My gosh, hello from Hamburg, Germany. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Just a reminder before we get started that as you signed up for the webinar, please know that within a relatively short period of time subsequent to the webinar, you'll be getting a link to this webinar so that you can watch it again, share it if you'd like, and also you'll be getting a copy of the slides today in PDF format, and we will also provide you with a certificate of completion. All of that will come to you subsequent to the webinar. So look for that. If for any reason you don't get it or you have any issues, please drop us a note and we'll get right to it. Well, it looks like we still have people rolling in, but in order to make sure that we have a good amount of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much again. This is Steve Constantino, and welcome to the 6th and final webinar of this series. And in my opinion, we saved the best for last. You've spent a lot of time over the last, for those of you who have been with us for all 6, we've spent a great deal of time talking about the role of families in the learning lives of children. We've talked about how that has changed significantly with the advent of COVID-19. We've spent a great deal of time talking about how we can leverage and promote family efficacy from afar. We've shared considerations in terms of teaching and learning and how that has changed. We've talked about the role of families and we've had most of our conversations have been centering on this academic, how can we provide a continuity of learning through this very, very difficult period. We ended up last week in talking about communication and some tips on how we can better communicate and communicate in a way that demonstrates empathy for the situations that we find families in. This week, and again, because of the feedback that we get from you, and thank you so much for that, the emotional well-being of people is extremely important, a huge ingredient in all of this. And in my opinion, we have the expert with us today who can help us through some social emotional learning issues and some things that we need to consider, not only as we work through toward the end of the school year. I know that the end of the year is coming shortly for many of you. Others will be ending school year in June. And it's a very uncertain future as to what the fall will look like. Will we be back? And if we are back in schools, what will that look like? And how is that going to work? So I suspect that those concerns are rolling around our heads as educators. I can imagine for a moment that they are of grave concern to families and students who very much want to get back to normal, but could have potentially some fears and anxieties about what that might look like. So today we wanted to lock in on that topic, and I want to introduce to you our very special guest, and then I'm going to let him take it away. But I am really pleased to and thankful to Dr. Saenz for giving us his time today. Adam Saenz earned his PhD in school psychology from Texas A&M University as a United States Department of Education doctoral fellow. He completed his predoctoral clinical training under a fellowship appointment to Harvard Medical School, and he has a postdoctorate in clinical psychology from the Alpert Medical School of Brown University. Dr. Saenz also earned a doctorate of ministry in pastoral counseling from Graduate Theological Foundation with residency at Christ Church College of Oxford University. Dr. Saenz is the author of the best-selling book, The Power of a Teacher and Relationships That Work. In his most recent release, The EQ Intervention, Raising a Self-Aware Generation Through Social and Emotional Learning, was released in January 2020. In addition to his clinical practice, Dr. Saenz is the CEO of the Applied EQ Group, the consulting agency he founded to foster peak performance in organizations and individuals via emotional intelligence. The Applied EQ Group's clients include K-12 school districts, post-secondary institutions, Fortune 500 companies, C-suite leaders, and elite athletes. Dr. Saenz and his wife Kim have been married for 25 years, and they have 4 children, Elisa, Maya, Isaiah, and Andrew. So without further ado, first of all, Adam, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. You should be able to control the PowerPoint, and when you hit next, if technology is on our side, your presentation will appear. Awesome. If not, fake it, Adam, until we fix it.
Fake it till you make it. As we say in the field, fake it
till you make it.
I hear you. All right. Well, thanks so much, Steve. It's great to be with all of you from across the country, around the world. What a delight. So I don't know about you. It's May, and I did my first webinar, led a webinar back in March, and have been doing them pretty nonstop since then. And I, about a week ago, got just kind of Zoom fatigue, and tired of looking at a camera kind of thing. So I thought, what can I do to mix it up? So I found this piece of equipment. I'm kind of a gearhead with electrical equipment and things like that. So it's like basically a sound mixer, but it's got these really cool features. So I'm gonna share that with you right now. So yeah, sorry. How many narcissists does it take to change a light bulb? It only takes one. The narcissist holds onto the light bulb and expects the world to revolve around him. See there? One man show, man. I'm killing it. Okay, we'll do one more. For those of you, the 3 of you that are still left online after that.
I'm watching the numbers. They're not dropping yet. Don't worry.
How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? It only takes one, but the light bulb first has to want to change. Okay, so that one wasn't so well received. All right, enough of that. But let me, I'll give myself a round of applause. All right, enough of that. Thanks, y'all, for bearing with me, for the 4 of you that are left. Yes. Well, let's jump into the content. I've been working with individuals, educators, corporate, everybody across the board for the last 6 weeks around this COVID-19 thing. And my goodness, who would have known? If you would have said to me in February, hey, guess what, Adam, the world will be shut down. No, we're not going to fly on planes. No, we're not going to go to work. No, we're not going to, I wouldn't have believed it. So we are still sort of in a state of shock and recovery in different places along the way. So my point today, really what I want to do is help you to, as a parent at home with your kids, give you just one sort of, I hope, practical maybe a couple of practical tools that will help you sort of make lemonade out of these lemons that life has given us. And specifically, we'll be talking about emotional intelligence and what you can do to help your children understand their feelings and regulate them. Because believe it or not, this is as difficult as a time this is, it's also a potentially valuable teaching time. So let's jump right in to the PowerPoint. So you're talking about emotional reality of learning at home. And the reality is that it's incredibly overwhelming. And I'm not just talking about for teachers who are teaching. I'm talking about parents who are saying, I don't have a degree in education. What are you talking about? Now I have to teach my child. I don't know how to do this. And the technology doesn't work. I can't figure it out. I mean, it's overwhelming. All of that is happening while you're still trying to figure out, do I have a job? Do I have an employment? Are we going to have the lights on next month? I mean, an incredibly stressful time for you as the adult in the home and your children. So again, hopefully we'll offer you some tips and tools that will help you navigate this well. So why does this matter? Let's start with a discussion of an amazing athlete. I think everyone who knows who that is on the left, Michael Jordan. Now the deal with Michael Jordan, how did he become, here's another piece of technology for you. So you check that out. And I just went to my second camera. I'm even in focus. So I'll be switching back and forth. Michael Jordan, here's what I don't think happened. I don't think Michael Jordan woke up one day at the age of 23 and said, what will I do with my life? I know, I'm going to be a basketball player. Let's see, what should I, Chicago, I heard they have a team. Well, let me just go check it out. And so he goes to the Chicago Bulls and says, I want to try out. And man, it turns out he ended up being one of the best players ever. Wow, glad that worked out. Well, of course not. It didn't work out that way. It was quite different. So what happened was, if you think to Michael Jordan and his career, before he was that NBA star, he was a collegiate star in North Carolina, doing amazing things as a collegiate athlete. And then, but even that he wasn't sitting around in his dorm one day like, sitting around, maybe I should try out for basketball. I think I could be good at it. Well, of course, it didn't work that way. Before he was the star in Carolina, he was a star high school athlete. So the point is that Michael Jordan being Michael Jordan was the culmination of years and years and years and years and years of practice dating back to his childhood, right? And so fair enough. I don't think I would have to argue too long with anyone to accept that. So let's take that parallel and shift it. I want you to think about that toxic boss that you may have had at some point in your career. And I had one about, it was the last school district that I worked for several years ago. And he was just absolutely miserable. So my story is that he was a bully, and he was used to getting his way by intimidating people, threatening them, shaming them, power playing them, power tripping them. And it was miserable to work for him, right? So the question, back to the Michael Jordan thing, is, how did he become that toxic boss? How did he become that toxic leader? Again, I don't think he woke up one day and said, I'm a pretty nice guy, but you know what? I'm going to try this toxic thing out. Maybe that'll work for me. So starting today, I'm going to be a toxic boss, and let me see how that goes. I don't think that was the case. I think it was before he was a high-level leader, a toxic high-level leader, he was a toxic mid-level leader. And before he was a toxic mid-level leader, he was a toxic entry-level employee. And before he was a toxic employee, he was probably a toxic college student going all the way back to his childhood. Because basically what happens for people that grow up to be bullies is that somewhere along the way, they practiced bullying behavior and it worked for them, and no one ever corrected them. So a toxic boss or a toxic leader becomes a toxic leader because they practiced it and practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. No one's corrected them, and they've gotten really, really good at it, right? So that's the deal. That's how all this goes. So think about that. What's happening now with our children, the habits they're making, the patterns that they're forming academically, behaviorally, psychologically, in terms of their emotional intelligence, they will practice these things, these skills that will carry them through high school. They will take them into college or into the working world, and eventually that's who they become as adults. So let me be very clear. I'm not saying that if your child or my child, my children are at home as well, if they grow up and become toxic adults, it's because I blew it during the COVID-19 crisis. That's not what I'm saying at all, right? It's as we say in the social sciences, it's truly a multivariate problem. But what I'm saying is that we have our kids with us in a very unique situation right now. And I want us to be able to use this time mindfully, thoughtfully as parents, leaders in the home, to say, how can we start either developing skills that are already there, or start, just the early stages of building skills that may not be there, specifically around how I and my child are managing these intense emotions. So like I said before, this is a difficult time. It's a challenging time. It's stretching us like nothing before. And because of that very point, this is an opportunity for us to find a better version of ourselves. This is an opportunity for us to find peak performance. So that's sort of the rationale. I think that's why this is so important, is because we have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity here. This habit matters, again, because the skills and habits we impart to our children carry into adulthood. And this is an opportunity for me to really grow and build a super foundation for my child and you for yours. Dan Goleman's an American psychologist. I think he's at Loyola. He wrote a book in 94. I think it was released in 94 called EQ, the emotion. That's what brought this topic to mainstream attention. And he said, if you don't have self-awareness, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and effective relationships, then check this out. No matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. And that's so true. I was presenting at a human resources conference, and so many of those professionals came up to me and said, college degrees are more accessible now than they've ever been, which is a great thing, I think. All things considered, it's wonderful. But from an employer perspective, what that means is when I post a job and I'm soliciting responses, I'm going to get a stack of very qualified applicants, right? They're all good. They all have great degrees. They all have experience. So what's going to distinguish at that point is it's not the technical skills. It's not the hard skills that you write on a resume. It's going to be soft skills. It's going to be able to, the people who can do this, that can look you in the eye and shake your hand and smile and have interpersonal skills and regulate their emotion. That's the kind of stuff that really distinguishes successful organizations from unsuccessful ones. Because in a free market economy, the customer is going to say, if you're going to treat me like trash, I don't have to deal with you. I'm going to go next door to your competitor. Which is why, again, employers are so looking for soft skills. And I think that's what Dan Goleman was getting at here when he was talking about the importance of the emotional intelligence. So what is SEL? Social emotional learning is the phrase we use in school districts. In businesses and corporation, we tend to call it emotional intelligence, but it's just the same thing. We just use different language. So if I'm going to do SEL, social emotional learning, in a classroom, on a campus, in my community, those 5 core areas need to be in place. Self-management and self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So essentially the way it works is if I'm self-aware and I'm managing myself appropriately, that piece, then I have better social awareness, and with my relationships, I can connect to you. So this is me inside me. I connect to you, the other, in the room or on the campus or at work or wherever, in the house. And when we come together, self-aware and self-regulated, we're going to make good decisions about how we live our life. And that little roadmap right there, it highlights why SEL is so incredibly valuable. I want to make good decisions. I'm pretty good at making bad decisions. And so I want to train myself to make good decisions. So my book that was released in January, the Heart Smart Classroom, is the name of the curriculum that we use in schools, our SEL curriculum. The book is called The EQ Intervention, and it's basically a summary of the work that our team has been doing in schools around social emotional learning, starting with adults, starting with the teachers, because I tell teachers all the time, listen, you're not going to be able to teach algebra unless you know algebra. You're not going to be able to teach a 5-paragraph theme unless you know how to write a 5-paragraph theme. And you're not going to be able to teach kids to regulate their emotion unless you know how to do that for yourself, right? And as adults on campuses, in school districts, in houses, in homes, learn to regulate their own emotion and manage themselves effectively, self-awareness and self-regulation, they become the living curricula for their kids. They are living out this SEL skill. So when we work on campuses, when we work with organizations, we always start with the adults and the leaders, teachers, so that they can internalize the model and then model that to the students. So let me go back to this map right there. Those are the 5 components of SEL. self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, those equal good decision-making. Here's another way to think of that. Self-awareness and self-regulation on the left hand, when I'm aware of myself and regulating myself, and I add that to empathy and social skills, I'm going to make good decisions about how to live my life in all areas of my life, not just as an educator, not just as a parent, but as an employee, as a neighbor, as a child, as a parent. Every area of my life gets better when I do these things, right? And so for this morning or this afternoon's workshop, we're really going to be focusing on the left-hand side, self-awareness and self-regulation. We don't have time really even to go into those in the kind of detail I'd like, but we're not going to empathy or social skills. We're going to focus on the left-hand side there. So let's jump in. There are 5 ways we can handle emotion. Getting back to this, I'm sorry, I keep flipping back and forth here, but self-awareness and self-regulation. So the question becomes, well, what do I need to be aware of? And what do I need to regulate? And there are lots of different things, but there's your personality, there's your stress, there's your thoughts, there's your emotions. So 4 or 5 big domains that I need to be aware of, that I need to be regulating. But again, for today, we're really just focusing on emotion as one aspect of those many things that I need to be aware of and I need to be regulating. So here's how that works. When we have emotion in the home, and lots of emotion because we're stressed out and overwhelmed. Kids are stressed out, parents are stressed, everybody's overwhelmed. So we have 5 things that we can do in response to emotion. Number 1 is ignore it, right? In some way, act like it's not there. So my kid's going crazy, they're freaking out, they're having a tough time, they're stressed out, they're overwhelmed, they're angry, and just ignore it. Like, and I'm thinking like, I'm too busy to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to ignore it and maybe it'll go away. But it's not going to go away. If anything, it'll get worse. So that's option number 1, is to ignore the behavior. Option number 2 is to inhibit the behavior. And that is this. Don't be sad. Don't be anxious. Just stop it. Quit being angry right now. Quit being sad right now. Turn that frown upside down. Whatever language you want to do, at least you're not ignoring it. You're acknowledging that emotion's on the table. But the problem with the inhibiting behavior is that emotion is fuel. It's psychic fuel. It's energy. And repressing emotion is repressing fuel. And eventually that stuff's going to bubble up. And we'll either end up externalizing it or internalizing it. So externalizing it through aggressive outbursts or internalizing it through an anxiety or depressive disorder. So I think of emotion as it's like fuel. Again, if it's in my system, it's building up. I want to get it out because I don't want that fuel inside of me because it'll do bad things to my body and my psyche. So inhibiting emotion is sort of like, I don't want to deal with it, just stop it, right? And it's not really helpful in the long run. So that's number 2. Number 3, we can invalidate emotion. And here's what invalidating emotion sounds like. You shouldn't feel angry. You should feel happy that you have a dad who loves you. You have a mom who loves you. You should be happy. There are kids in Africa that would love to be in your air-conditioned home right now, having to do homework over the internet. You shouldn't be mad that you lost your senior prom. You should be happy that you're at least graduating. So you're just invalidating it. And again, that's just not helpful because what you're teaching your child in that moment is don't trust your feelings. You're wrong. Your whole emotional map is wrong. So you need to get over it, right? And again, that's just not helpful when we're invalidating those feelings. So first one, ignore. Second one, inhibit. Third one, invalidate. The 4th one is invite. And that's where we start getting scary, right? Because now you're at a point where you're having to deal with the issues, right? You're not ignoring, you're not in denial about anything. So how do you invite the behavior? You just ask, how are you feeling right now? Do you feel angry? Do you feel sad? Do you feel frustrated? Are you happy, right? That you don't have to go to school? I mean, whatever your emotion is, I want to know about it. Tell me about it. Let's talk about it. That's scary because inviting emotion is like, oh my God, because emotion is energy. So you're inviting energy to the table. And sometimes that energy is scary and it's intense and it's intimidating and it's threatening for us as adults. And you're inviting it. I mean, you better know what you're doing when you bring that emotion to the table. But until I invite the emotion to the table, I can't instruct it. And that's where we want to land, is instructing emotion. I'm going to talk about what that means here in a minute. But those are the 5 things that we do in response to emotion. Now think about it. Our goal as adults, and certainly our goal for our children, is we want you to know your emotions and we want you to be able to experience them and express them appropriately. That will keep you emotionally healthy, is being able to recognize those emotions, accept them, own them, express them, and just be real. That's good emotional health. I want that, and I want that for my child, right? Fair enough. But think about this. Think about if our goal was to teach math, right? And so we're the math instructor, and so math comes up, and we say we're going to ignore math. We're going to ignore all numbers. We don't do numbers in this house. I'm just going to pretend like they're not there. So if I'm ignoring numbers, am I ever going to get to teach them? Nope. What if I inhibit numbers? So numbers show up in my house, wherever, on a calendar or on a checkbook, and I say we don't do numbers in this house. Just put that away. I don't want to see. Am I ever going to get to? Nope, I'm not. What if I invalidate numbers are stupid, right? You shouldn't be a 7. You should be the letter R. However, we're invalidating the concept of numbers. Never going to get. But once I started inviting numbers and saying there are numbers on calendars, there's numbers on the clock, there are numbers on your phone. Let's learn. Now we can instruct numbers. We can start teaching mathematics. Same thing with reading. Same thing with emotion, right? So those are 5 ways that we can handle emotion. And until I get to a point where I'm inviting and instructing emotion, I'm really missing the boat. I'm really not empowering my child with the skill set they're going to need to move through this season, move into next season, going back to school, and move into their adolescence and adulthood. Okay, so let's look at the last one, instructing emotion. How do you actually do that? And here's a 5-step, I think it's 5 steps. Let's see, I think it's 5 steps. Yeah, it is. It's 5 steps. Maybe it's 4. It's a handful of steps. I'll put it that way. A handful of steps you can implement to instruct emotion. And man, you don't have to be a psychologist or a therapist or a social. This is just down and dirty, basic, easy, good, common sense parenting. Number 1, identify the feeling using a chart or any other clues. So you say, Adam, it looks like you're feeling angry. I see that your fists are clenched, your eyebrows are squished. It looks like you feel like this face on this chart here, so you can have a feelings chart like that. So remember, good emotion starts by me inviting emotion. So getting back to that slide, I might say like I've got 4 kids, and they're all different, in different ways. And one of my kids, very, very emotional, very intuitive, my youngest son. And you ask him how he's feeling, and he'll tell you like, I'm feeling kind of melancholy, but there's I have bursts of anger with that, but I'm learning to sort of regulate that because I'm listening to this new album, by this new band that I'm really into, and Coulter Wall's gone a long way. He just really articulate. And then there's my other son, and he's either I'm okay or I'm mad. Well, you look sad, I'm okay. You look angry, that's all. That's his vocabulary is I'm okay or I'm angry, right? So anyway, you may ask, you're thinking, okay, I'm trying to be a good parent. Son, how are you feeling? Daughter, how are you feeling? I don't know. I'm fine. You get that because maybe they don't know, or they don't have the language. They don't have the emotional literacy. So then you say, well, look at this lovely little chart that I found. I heard the psychologist on a webinar, and he said I should get one. So I got it. So now let's get down and do some business, right? So you ask them to identify the feeling, whatever it is. And they learn to this is increasing empathy too, because they're learning to associate a word called frustration or sadness or happiness with an emotion, the thing that I feel, and with the facial features that identify that emotion. So it's really great. So then you identify the feeling, and then you validate the feeling. It's okay to feel angry. Man, I feel angry too. It's okay to feel sad. I'm sad too. It's okay to feel scared. I'm scared too. I'm not sure what's going to happen with work. We'll be fine. We've got each other, but yeah, it's okay. I feel those feelings all the time. We're not going to invalidate them. We're going to validate them. It's okay. Then we link the feeling with the behavior, and this is where we get instructional. This was where my egomaniacal, narcissistic boss never got training with his anger and his need to control. So you link the feeling with the behavior. So let's say your child or you, I get angry, and I start saying things that are hurtful and not helpful. Or let's say I start damaging property, right? Or doing things with that emotion, that fuel it's hurtful and not helpful. Then I can say this, Adam, listen, I know you're angry but I see that when you feel angry, you use your body to hurt others, and that's not okay. It's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hurt other people. I see that you're sad, Adam, and when you get sad, you cut your arm, or you withdraw and you close yourself off and you don't talk to anybody. It's okay to feel sad, but it's not okay to hurt yourself, and it's not okay to shut down from people because people need to be connected to you. So you link the feeling with the behavior. And then step 4 is you offer a substitute behavior and you say, listen, Adam, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hit. It's not okay to punch. It's not okay to cuss me out. It's not okay to destroy property. Listen, next time you get angry, I want you to take 5 deep breaths and just do this. Breathe in peace. Hold in peace. Breathe out anger. Breathe in peace. Second time. Hold in peace. Breathe out anger. And let's do that 5 times, right? So you're teaching your child to link the behavior with a substitute, adaptive, helpful behavior, okay? So now they have a good roadmap. Now they've actually been instructed on how to manage each emotion. And each emotion can have its own roadmap. So when we're sad, we do this. When we're angry, we do this. When we're confused, we do this. When we're afraid, we do this. When we're happy, we do this, right? Whatever it might be. So you have a roadmap to get through those emotions. And you're no longer scared to invite the emotion out. Then the last thing you do is you reward of any approximation of the replacement behavior. So let's say it goes like this. So Adam's angry and you say, oh yeah, I remember that guy online said I need to get a feelings chart. So I got my feelings chart and I said, Adam, how are you feeling? And he said, I'm angry, and we were killing it. And I said, oh, you're angry. Yeah, well, what do you do when you're angry? You hit things. Yeah. And what did we decide? Well, we decided that instead of hitting things, you're going to take some deep breaths. Yeah, I got it, Mom. Okay, I got it, Dad, whatever. Okay, so let's do that now. And Adam goes, breathe in peace, hold in peace, breathe out anger. 1. Breathe in peace. I hate you, this sucks. This is still, why am I? And then Adam freaks out, right? So the temptation is to say, Adam, when are you going to learn? Why can't you? No, you were supposed to go 5, you only gave me 1. But instead of doing that, I'm going to regulate my own anger as an adult. And I'm going to say, you know what, Adam? You gave me 1 breath, man. Thank you so much for trying. It's so hard to try when you feel that angry, you know, but you tried. And that's awesome, man. Thank you. I'm proud of you. Keep doing that good work. You inspire me to want to do my best work too. That's how you start shaping and growing the behavior, is you find the little bit of progress that they're making or that they're showing, and you just dump miracle grow, some kind of growth thing on it. And that is called encouragement. And then you begin to shape behavior. And you say, so you may say to Adam, you know what, Adam, today you breathed 1 time, and awesome, I'm proud of you. I wonder if by next week, what if we can get it up to 2? Or maybe we can get it up to 3, or maybe we can get up to 4. You know, so then you start shaping the behavior, and you give Adam an on-ramp to learn this new behavior. And then that's great. And that way you've got realistic expectations. You're not setting anyone up for failure, and you're moving along the way. Okay. So 2 key truths for our students to know about their emotions. Number 1, all emotions are okay. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. We think emotions are bad because we so often see bad or challenging emotion paired with hurtful behavior. And so we make this moral judgment about that anger or sadness. You know, we say, oh, anger's bad, sadness is bad. It's not bad. It's just energy. That's all it is. You know, it's like the fuel I put in my car. I can take a 5-gallon tank of gasoline, pour it in my car, and use my car to give you a ride to the store, and that fuel is a blessing. I can take the same 5-gallon tank of gas, pour it around your house, and burn your house down, and the fuel is a curse to you. The fuel has no inherent morality. The question is, what am I doing with it? The application of the fuel is where the good or bad comes in. So fuel is just emotion. That's all it is. And any emotion, any fuel, we can harness to make as a force to make our life better. And that's the second bullet there are helpful and hurtful ways to handle our emotion. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, that's my last slide. More information if you want to find out more, but there's a couple of things that I didn't load into slides. I'm just going to kind of shoot from the hip on this, and maybe another 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, or Steve, if you have any comments. I did a webinar this morning for a school district in Chicago, and they were, what they're doing for their faculty is they're going through the alphabet, and they're bringing guest speakers in to do 15 minutes on any letter. So the letter A, what do you want us to know in 15 minutes about the letter A? Something encouraging, hopeful, whatever. And my letter was the letter Q because no one else wanted it. And my book happens to be called the EQ intervention. So I was the guy that got stuck with Q, but that's fine. So what I did was I framed it in terms of the letter Q. I want to bring 3 questions, which start with the letter Q, question. Right? I was as clever as I could get. These were the 3 questions that I've posed to them. When you think about where you're at right now as the adult in the home, when you think about where your kids are, here's a roadmap for you, apart from this 5-step program about how to manage your emotions. Question number 1, have you grieved? Have you grieved? And man, we have so much to grieve, and it's so important to grieve what we've lost right now. And so the stages of grieving, very briefly: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance, right? Most of us were in denial back in March. Oh, they're never going to shut schools down. Oh, if they shut schools down, we'll be back in business. And by the end of April, surely, oh, they'll never end for the school year, right? And here we are at the end of May, and it didn't happen. So I was in denial till about April 1st, April 2nd. And then the governor in Texas said, hey, we're done for the year. Good luck, God bless, right? And then I got angry. I went into the second stage. Whose fault is this? Let me blame a political party. Let me blame a country. Let me blame the media. Let me blame whoever, right? So you go through your anger and you start blaming, and that doesn't really help anything. Then you get to bargaining. Well, maybe if we go to online instruction, maybe that'll be a helpful thing to do. Maybe we can still salvage, bargaining, but, and it's like, okay, well, we'll do what we can do, but it's not going to be the same. I mean, make no mistake about it. So that was bargaining. Now I think we're in depression. It's May, it's mid-May, we're at the end of the year, and hey, man, it's been what it's been, and we're just sad, We miss the kids, we miss our routine, we miss our jobs, we miss our income, it is what it is. So depression, and then we can get to acceptance and say, yes, this really is what it is. And there's things I can change and things I can't change, and it feels like most of it I can't change. I'm at acceptance. But until I get to acceptance, I'm not going to be able to say, okay, what now? How do I prepare for the summer? How do I prepare for next fall? If I'm still locked in anger and bargaining and denial and all that other nonsense, right? It's not nonsense. It's only nonsensical to the degree that it keeps me from being adaptive and in the moment, right? It's actually necessary. It's not nonsensical. It's necessary. And I'll go back into those stages, but I always need to remember that acceptance is my North Star. That's where I want to land, right? That's where I need to be centered from. Then I get to acceptance, and then I can start looking forward. Okay, so the first question is, have I gone through my grieving? Second question is, have I surrendered? And what I mean by that is, surrender, it keeps me from cycling back into the stages of grieving. So surrendering means, I remember back in February, if any one of us would have heard, hey, guess what? You're not going to have a job in 2 months. No, you're going to be teaching your kids at home on a computer. No, they're going to shut everything down. You can't even go to the store, right? And you'll sort of get to go, but you have to wear a mask. Like, no way, right? No one would have believed that, right? And don't worry, the government will generate $2 trillion. Like, no, that's crazy talk. Well, you know what, man? I quit saying never, and I just got to a place where I'm accepting, like, we might be back in school in the fall and we might not. It might be online, it might be in person, or we might be online for another year. Who knows? But we've got to surrender, right? And then the third question is this sort of related to the surrender is, do I have realistic expectations? And oh gosh, like, forgive me for going Dr. Phil here, but I'm going to give you some reality therapy. If you think that getting kids back into schools in August is going to suddenly make things normal again, it's not. It is not. And call me biased as a licensed psychologist or whatever, but people are talking about all the crisis that COVID-19 has caused. Look at all this mental illness, and the episodes of domestic violence has increased, and the referrals to child protective services has increased. Oh, this COVID-19 thing, damn it all, right? You know what? It didn't cause that. It just exposed it. This stuff has already been there. And for those of us who are working in schools all these years, we've known it's always been there, but society didn't know it. They were just in denial or delusional or whatever. So all the stuff that we're seeing now in terms of mental health issues, and COVID-19 didn't cause it. It just exposed it. The stuff that COVID-19 is causing, and be clear, it is causing stuff. We're not going to see that for 6 months to a year, as in when we go back to school, right? So if you're thinking that, like, oh, we're going to go back to school and we're going to be a big happy family again and we're going to get back to normal, I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. And I think in many ways, some of our most difficult days are going to start around sometime after Labor Day and go with us through early to mid-December or January into February. I really think so. I think emotionally, the heavy lifting is yet to come. And I'm not trying to be, a naysayer, doom and gloom. I just want to be reality based. And I want my hope to be reality based. I want my future to be reality based. And if you're thinking that getting back to school will help, absolutely. A return to some form of ritual will help, but it will not heal. That's not going to heal us, And so we just need to be reality based. So again, I'll conclude with those 3 questions. Have you grieved? Have you set up realistic expectations? Moving forward into the fall, and then are you aware sort of that the toughest work lies ahead? So that's it, man. That's all I got as a psychologist. I hope that those words have given you. Number one, I want you to, if you feel overwhelmed, just know that you're not alone and you're not wrong. I'll put it this way: if you're not freaked out right now, I think you're in denial, right? You just haven't been paying attention. So if you're overwhelmed, you're in good company, including me, PhD in psychology, 20 years clinical practice, right? We're all kind of freaked out. And number 2, just do your little thing. Just do the little thing you can do at home, right? And that little thing is just give your kids permission to feel, give yourself permission to feel, and then find a quick little roadmap to find a plan to navigate that feeling. There's every one of those feelings, think of it as a potential fuel source to bring out the best version of you. So that's it. So Steve, with that in mind, I see that it's about 1:41 right now.
And there's a couple of
and let me throw it back to you. And do we have questions?
Sure. First of all, thank you. I loved your line. That's all I got.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's all I got. I think we could all probably.
That's all I got.
We could unpack it for the next.
I have to say.
well, the rest of us will unpack it for the next week.
Yeah.
You, Adam. A couple of things that come to mind. We've talked a lot in our previous webinars. And I've done some webinars for some districts and some organizations about this whole COVID experience, as you have. And one of the things that I have said is that, if we didn't have a trusting relationship with a family prior to COVID, COVID didn't make it so. It's not, suddenly parents found themselves in the role of teacher.
No.
It doesn't mean that they felt any better about their relationship with the school or the relationship with their children's teachers. And so we've talked a lot about, before we can try to promote efficacy in families to promote academics, we have to promote positive relationships. We have to get to the bottom of disengagement if there's mistrust and those issues. I'm reminded of, and there's a couple of questions I want to ask you, but you've raised a couple of points. One was about relationships. The second was about grieving. We were so, as educators, when I say we, I talk about all of us in education, we were given, literally 48 hours to figure out how to redesign public, education in the United States. And I think in our race to try to fill the continuity gaps of learning, we forgot that there's just a sea of emotion out there in terms of, again, I'm not even going to go into it because I think you explained it pretty well. But in the way, there are small things that we can, and we talked about this in previous webinars, if we send an assignment home, start the assignment by saying, I miss you, and I miss seeing you, and I hope you're well. And end the assignment and give parents the encouragement by saying, whatever you do, it's going to be great. And so trying to take some of that pressure off.
Yeah.
We can help teachers understand social emotional learning. We have professional development outlets. And one of the questions that has come in from the audience that I think is interesting is the question of how can we get this information and these techniques to families? What's the best way to help families do and go through some of the things that you have suggested as we work our way through this problem?
Well, I think that from a pragmatic perspective, if the family has access to technology, if they have a computer and Wi-Fi, my understanding, well, I know that I'm recording this webinar as well on my end, and Steve, I think you are on your end. We're going to archive this, and so this will be available to anyone. And I don't mean to speak out of turn, but is that correct, Steve?
I think it'll be available on both of our sites. So
Great,
wherever you put it, we'll put it on our site. So double the
sure. Yeah, and it's free. Just log on and watch it. So that would be the first recommendation, is just to watch this video. And I've got There's several other webinars that I've archived on my website that again are free. You just log on and watch it, and please feel free to direct them to the website. It's down there on the bottom, theappliedeqgroup.com.
Great.
Yep.
Another interesting question, as a result of this conversation, someone has asked, is it a good idea to put a further strain on some of the relationships that exist right now by offering unsolicited parental advice in emotional learning?
No.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Unsolicited, no. I mean, and this is, I guess, my bent as a mental health provider. You can start with questions, though. You can instead of going straight into like, hey, there's something wrong with you. Let me give you the treatment you need. You could say, how are you feeling? Right, and I'm fine. We're good. Everything's fine. And then you may say, okay, great. I'm glad to hear that. I just want you to know that I feel grateful to be in a connection with you right now. And a lot of parents are feeling overwhelmed. They're stressed out. I mean, you say that you're handling it well. I'm glad to hear that. But if you ever get to a point where you feel like the other parents who are really, really overwhelmed, please let me know. I feel overwhelmed as a parent, and I'm confident that I partner with you and help you in some important ways. That feels much less invasive, much less condemning versus like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Well, here, you need to watch this webinar, right? That kind of direct approach can be off-putting, I think, to some people. So I would just start by being curious, honestly curious with the parent, and gentle and kind, and how are you doing? And if they say they're fine, that's the end of the discussion. And then if you don't believe them, say, well, great, I'm glad you're fine. Not everyone is, and if you ever get to a point where you're struggling, please let me know, because I'd love to be a resource.
Yeah. Early on in as we were all learning, how we were going to continue moving forward in COVID, and by all of us, I mean, those people, on the front lines of education, teachers and principals and counselors and social workers, but then those of us who, everybody in the world had to pivot immediately to figure out how we're going to continue. Yeah. And as we work through that, I was reminded of a book that I had read a long time ago. I don't want to state the year because it'll just reinforce how old I am. But in the 1980s, at some point, there was a book called Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. And I've always remembered a couple of points from that book. And one of the points the authors made was that every family has one thing in common, at least one thing in common, and that is that they want their children to exceed them in their quality of life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think COVID has produced is this fear amongst families, that it's not a fear of illness. It's a fear of what's going to happen to my child's life if they've had this huge hole in their education right now. Is there anything you can speak to in terms of that fear that may be driving itself or manifesting itself in some unusual behaviors in families, and perhaps we just somehow need to understand that?
Yes, great point, Steve. Thank you. Well, I would say the first thing, if you're a parent and you're afraid, that fear tells me that you care about your kid, and I'm glad to know that, right? The ones that scare me are the ones that are indifferent, like whatever, it's his education. The second thing I would say is remember that this will sort of just a cognitive reframe to help you keep context. The gaps, whatever gaps your child experiences, it's going to be normative. This generation of children in school will all look back and say, COVID-19, remember, right? The gaps will be across the board. And so I don't know that any one child, there may be some children who suffer disproportionately because of it, but I think there will be gaps across the board, number one. Number two, I would say that if you're anxious about your child's success, that means you're invested in your child's success. Maintain the investment through this, be a support to them. And depending on where they're at, this will affect a student in kindergarten differently than it will someone who's a junior, like my youngest son's a junior in high school, like real critical year academically as they prepare to go to college. For your kids that are on the way out, and this really does represent a significant chunk of missed learning, just partner with them in the anxiety around it and say, yeah, we're both scared around this. But hey, you have me and I have you. And I guarantee you that no matter what the next phase is, I've always found a way to help you. And I will continue to be your biggest supporter and ally as you look for trade school, as you join the military, as you go to university, as you start working, whatever it is. If we start finding out that there are gaps in what you need to be successful, I'm here. I got your back. I've always had your back, and I will always have your back. And that's it. And that doesn't inoculate them. And that way you can know that they will never miss a beat, right? They may miss 30 beats, but what that means is that the crisis represents an opportunity for you and your child to develop a deeper bond. And I can almost guarantee you that what you want more for your child than material success is a deeper bond with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to address one comment in the chat box, and then there's another question, Adam, that I think is a good one. Lots of questions. I don't know that we're going to get to all of them, but there's a couple of folks that have written in the chat box about their concern over disengaged families, and one of the things that we've talked about in the previous webinars, and if you have not participated in our previous webinars, you can go to our website and you can log into any one of them that we've done. But we've talked about the fact that I started this conversation today by saying if they were disengaged before COVID, guess what? They're still disengaged now. What we have to do is put the tools and processes in place to reestablish two-way communication and trust so that we can build back that engagement of those families. It is possible, and that's really the bulk of the work work that we do. So don't, it is of concern to teachers for families who don't seem to care. I've never met a family who didn't care. Mm-hmm. I've met a lot of families who wanted me to believe that they didn't care, but I've never really met a family who didn't care. I also, and I don't know, I should probably not say this in front of a licensed psychologist, but I often think that anger is a mask for fear. Sure. That, when people blow up at us, for any one of those reasons, that if we can find the fear, there's an underlying fear there somewhere. If we can find that fear, we can probably help resolve that anger. I think it's fairly obvious now in the situation that we find ourselves in that, this whole situation is just causing a great deal of unease and a great deal of fear. But the question that I want to make sure I get to is from a teacher, I think, who said, how do we put aside our own fears to help our students and our families? How do we manage ourselves while we're trying to manage all of these students and their families? Interesting question.
Yes, very, very interesting question. Yeah, and that question is sort of central to the therapeutic process. When you're in therapy, connecting with somebody at a very deep, intimate level about deeply emotional issues, there's always the question of what emotion am I experiencing as the helper, and how do I need to regulate that so that I can be a good helper to the person that I'm in the room with. So I would say that the first step for the teacher struggling with their own fears is to acknowledge it, to be honest with it, those steps of emotion. Don't ignore it. Don't in any way minimize it, rationalize it, deny it. Don't invalidate it. But to acknowledge it, invite the fear, and instruct your own fear. So when you're afraid, what do? Well, I shut down. Well, I start making catastrophic statements. We're never going to be the same. This is, okay, great. Is that helpful or hurtful? Probably not too helpful. What can I do that's helpful with that fear? I can start a journal. I can start a group of other teachers that are also afraid, and we can just share our fear and share hope with each other so that we can feel like we're in this together. So, those are some just basic strategies to help regulate the fear. And then with your students, there's a balance. On the one hand, you want to be the secure foundation for them. You want to be the rock for them. And it's okay as the secure foundation to let your students know some level of self-disclosure is appropriate and helpful. To say, I feel afraid too, and these are the things that I'm doing. I'm talking to my friends to help me feel safe. I talk to my family to help me feel safe. I write in my journal to help me feel safe. I think about all the good times we had together, and that calms me and soothes me. I think about all the things, how many people I want to hug. I have a hug list of 78 people. Those would be the first people I hug. And when I think about building that list, that makes me feel better. So you're sort of inviting the student or the child into your own emotional process in a way that's very controlled, structured, and instructional in the end. So it's such a good question. I don't even like my answer to it, because that's like a webinar on its own.
It is. I think any one of these questions we could drill down and determine things. So many. One of the phrases that has been coined on social media of late is Maslow before Bloom. And understanding that we need to meet the needs of families and students before we can try to move them through some kind of learning. One of the recommendations we made early on, and we've gotten some positive feedback from it, is for when teachers to, instead of dedicating all of their time to teaching and learning of students, to dedicate a portion of their time, perhaps let learning go for a day. I don't think the world stopped turning. I think one of the things we realize is that the pace of learning has changed, and it perhaps could change forever. We don't really know the answer to that question yet. But the concept that you said earlier of making up, I don't know that that's the way we ought to look at it. But anyway, I agree with you that we probably ought to be realistic about where we are and move forward from that point, as opposed to hoping. As I've said in many organizations I've been involved with, hope has never been the greatest strategy to improvement. But one of the ideas that we shared early on that we've gotten some positive feedback are some teachers have just created Zoom sessions for families with no agenda.
Nice.
Where they have just, we say, let families log on if they want to. If they don't want to and there's nobody there, no harm done. But it's almost an open office hour, and don't fill it with school stuff. Don't fill it with learning stuff. Just say, hey, how you doing? And let families talk, because I think we're all in this isolated state. And I also think too that we all look for someone to share concerns with, someone to share questions with, just to have a conversation. So to continue to kind of reinforce this notion that folks' emotional needs will continue to be front and center. Some folks have suggested, well, we're enough through COVID now that everybody is kind of settled in. I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't really want to settle into this. But I also know that we have a new wave of fear coming, and that is, what will the fall look like? Where we will be, where will the students be? And you're seeing pictures now of kids being socially distanced in classrooms and socially distanced on buses, and how's that going to work? I think it's providing educators certainly with one of the greatest challenges I think that I have seen in my career. Adam, thank you. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your humor. Two things that I want a second camera now. I'm going to tell my team, I want a second camera, and I want that thing that makes noises, because that would spice my life up a little bit. Or I'm going to go get an old bike horn and use that.
That could be fun too.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, before we leave today, I want to remind you that we always have our online learning programs and practices. We invite you to visit our website at drsteveconstantino.com to look at all of our online learning programs and processes we have for professional development in family engagement. Also would invite you to visit Dr. Sein's website, which you see at the bottom of the slide today, appliedeqgroup.com. Also, this is the 6th of our series of webinars, and this is our last webinar for a while. For two reasons. One, school is coming to a close in a lot of the country, and will be coming to a close shortly thereafter in most of the country. And as Adam said at the beginning, a lot of us, everybody has been on a webinar or on Zoom pretty much continuously. But we're going to think about how we might be able to assist as we look at the reentry to schools. When we know a little bit more about what the fall might look like, we hope to be back with you and to help you navigate this tremendously challenging situation. I also would be remiss if I didn't thank every educator on this webinar for everything that you have done for students and families, communities, in our country. I think when I think about the unsung heroes, when I see the commercials about the medical field that has given 300%. I also think about the educators who have gone above and beyond and have been Herculean in their efforts to help kids and help families, because that's what we do. And so thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done. Thanks for being with us for these webinars. If you've been with us for all 6, thank you. Don't forget us. We'll let you know when we're back with more. Dr. Saenz, again, thank you very much for your time today. And with that, I will say goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.